still figuring out our schedule for the rest of the year. One idea we have is that hopefully by the end of the summer, we can maybe do these in person again. And by then, as some of you guys know, we're redoing our Blue Ash office, and maybe we can do it in person there and have a nice in-person, comfortable meeting again. We're gonna have some food and have a good time. But so anyway, so real quick, I know a lot of us know each other. What I'd like to do is go around real quick, introduce ourselves, and tell us what your favorite childhood hobby was. And let's see, Suzanne, I'm gonna start with you.
I didn't hear the question because the call came in.
Okay.
What was
your name and your favorite childhood hobby?
Did you say childhood?
It doesn't have to be.
Or my favorite hobby? Okay.
Yeah.
My name is Suzanne. I'm the billing manager for Office Key. And my favorite hobby would be drinking wine. Does that sound bad? That's why I said childhood challenge. What?
All right.
Working here, of course, is my favorite.
That's right. All right. How about Jamie? How about you?
Yeah, Jamie Landers. So I work for a company called Salas O'Brien. We're an engineering firm, and let's see, favorite childhood hobby. Boy, that's a long time ago now. I guess a great activity I'd like to do is a lot of outdoor camping type of activities.
Nice. All right, Abby, how about you?
I'm Abby Gardner. I work for Office Key, and my favorite childhood hobby hasn't changed much. It was reading.
That's good. Favorite type of book?
Back then, it was definitely anything fantasy based.
Okay. Still the case, or what do you like now?
Yeah, but I've grown to like nonfiction, historical nonfiction as well. So I've matured a little bit, not much.
That's right. That's good. It's good for the brain to read some fiction. Fran, how about you?
My name is Fran. I work for Office Key, and my favorite hobby was gymnastics.
Ah, wow. What was your favorite event?
The floor exercise, the floor routine.
Really?
Wow.
Nice. Didn't know that.
Yep.
Crazy. All right, Terry, how about you? You hear us?
Look like she's frozen.
Terry?
Yeah.
Hello? Okay. Jason, to you.
My name is Jason. I work with AccuSource Group.
Hi, my name is Terry.
There she is.
Go ahead, Terry. Did we lose her? We lost her altogether.
Yeah, she lost.
All right. We'll
Okay.
Go ahead, Jason.
Jason with AccuSource Group, and we do recruiters, healthcare technology. And my favorite childhood hobby was also gymnastics. No, I'm just joking. Probably I lived in an apartment complex, so all the kids would get together and play street hockey. So that was always fun.
Bonnie, are you there? That's all right.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Alrighty. Oh, favorite childhood hobby? Well, goes back to rural life. My favorite hobby as a kid was bottle feeding the little baby lambs and piglets, the ones who had kind of been abandoned or weren't going to make it. My dad would have us 3 kids bottle feed them and sort of nurse them along, and we never lost any.
Wow.
So yeah.
So did you have any fancy spiders like Charlotte Webb was?
No.
Oh man, that would have really been a story.
That would have been awesome.
I know, yeah.
It looks like Elizabeth's still trying to connect. I don't know if she's. Oh, there you go.
There she is.
Hi.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Hello. Sorry.
Welcome.
Yeah,
just
I tried to get a phone to work, and there's a little bit of a logging issue. But anyway,
no problem.
I'm glad
We're
to
here now.
be here. Yeah.
So introduce yourself and tell us your favorite childhood hobby.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay. So my name is Elizabeth Na, and I'm a CPA. I have been with Office Key for 6 or 7 years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see my childhood hobby. So I grew up in Taiwan. My mother's work had to do with, she had in contact with mails from all different countries.
Mhm.
So she would bring the empty envelopes with beautiful foreign stamps. So, and she started to, so I like to collect stamps when I was growing up, foreign countries.
Cool. That's interesting.
So,
Do you
yeah.
still have them?
I stopped doing that after I went to college, and so, but my brother had all of our albums. I don't know. I'm pretty sure he still has them.
That's cool. Wonder if they're valuable. That's interesting.
I don't know
Okay,
if
cool.
it's valuable, but at the time we thought, oh,
That's
it
pretty
was
cool.
just really cool.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. All
Yeah.
right, Terry, how about you? Can you hear us? Or are you frozen again?
Can you hear me now?
I don't think it's
Are
happening.
we good?
We're
Can you hear
losing
me
you.
now?
Yeah, a little bit.
Let's see. So you can't hear me?
We can now.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. All right.
No.
And Angela, how about you? What's your
Okay.
favorite
Joined
childhood
late,
hobby?
so I didn't hear the
You
question.
can't hear me? So as a kid, I always just,
Are we getting it or no? Terry, can you hear us?
she said she didn't hear the question. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Can you hear us?
You can hear me?
Yeah. All right. I'm sorry, Terry. I'm just going to mute you if I can. I don't know if
I can hear you. Can you hear
Okay,
me?
we can hear you. Yes. Yes. Please go if you can.
Okay.
Otherwise, we're going to move on.
So I like anything fitness related. Even when I was little, I'm a body combat instructor and I do martial arts all the time. So
Cool. All right. I think I got that. Good stuff. Angela, how about you? What was your favorite childhood hobby or current hobby if it's drinking wine?
Collecting spiders.
that's what I really
Reptiles.
like to do.
Yes. Lived in Tucson, Arizona, so yes. Yeah, my
Good
dad
tip.
ended my
That's
little
fine.
spree as a child when I brought home a black widow.
Hard to pass on that. We should have taken you to Bonnie's farm. We could have done the Charlotte's Web thing with those spiders. Coming together full circle. Dad, how about you? Why don't you go ahead real quick and introduce yourself and your childhood hobby, if it's not soapbox derby racing.
Okay, well, I'm Dave Myers. I'm the founder of Office Key, and my favorite hobby was joining with my sister to torment my younger brother. We would gang up on him. But otherwise, I was going to say soapbox derby, but I'm going to say bike riding, which has carried me through until today. I still enjoy bike riding.
All right, and I'm Justin. As you guys probably know, I would say my favorite childhood hobby, I loved playing baseball when I was a kid. That was probably my favorite sport. I always loved sports, and baseball was my favorite for a long time. And basketball as well, but when I was a younger kid, baseball was my dream wasn't to run Office Key. No offense to my dad, but it was to be a Major League Baseball player. But those dreams were dashed pretty quickly. So anyway, all right. Well, anyway, thanks for coming. Thanks for doing that. It's always fun to get to know everybody on a level that maybe we wouldn't have otherwise. I had no idea, Fran, that you did gymnastics. That's cool. So anyway, so today Office Key is the 2021 racing sponsor of the local Soapbox Derby. So my dad, Dave, who's our Office Key's founder, is going to speak about that a little bit. There's some upcoming events that are kind of cool. My youngest son did a test drive in a Soapbox Derby car, I guess just this past weekend. He was a little terrified. He's our youngest, and he's a little bit nervous about those things. But anyway, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dad, you, and take the floor and tell us a little bit more about it.
Okay, well, thank you for giving me the chance to talk about the Soapbox Derby. It has had an influence on my life, and there's a race coming up on June 6th at Alt Park, and I would encourage you all to come to that. But the Soapbox Derby is a great activity to build confidence in kids that are, say, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, usually before they get their driver's license in that age where they really need to gain some confidence. And by building a car and having the courage to race that down a track, that can be a real confidence booster. The other thing it does is it brings families together. Families that get involved in the soapbox derby, they might have different children in the derby, and those children can compete against each other regardless of age. And usually the child needs to build a car by themselves, but it takes some mentoring and some coaxing by parents, and there's the logistics of getting the child, either boy or girl, to the races, and it becomes a great family building activity. And then the third thing is it's quite educational. I built a car when I was in 1968, and after I graduated high school, I went to engineering school. When I got there, some of the terms they talked about, compression and tension and friction, I could think back to the times that I built the soapbox derby car and turning the bolts and putting stress on the cable and building the brake system and all those kind of things. It really helped me to understand those terms. So there is a connection between the soapbox derby and STEM education, which is real important. So I'd like to show you, to start off with, I'd like to show you a 4-minute video, but maybe before we do that, why don't we go around and tell me if you have had a family member or someone you know has been involved in the soapbox derby.
It might be easier just if you have, let us know, because I would guess that probably most people have not.
Anybody have anybody involved in soapbox derby? Nope. Okay. Well, maybe this video will shed some light on it, and then I'll talk some more.
The soapbox derby originated in 1934 in Dayton, Ohio. Actually, it was started by a newsman by the name of Myron Scott. He was out as a photographer for the newspaper taking photographs, and he saw these young boys who were racing cars that they had built themselves. They had built them from everything, scrap lumber, wheels off baby carriages, all that kind of thing. And he got the idea, well, let's organize this and have an official race, and he did that. In 1934, he sold the idea to Chevrolet, which became the national sponsor, and there were 34 cities participated that year and sent champions to Dayton, Ohio for the first All-American Soapbox Derby. The following year, the Derby program moved to Akron, and it was held on Talmadge Avenue, a city street on the east side of the city. And the following year, the city fathers thought it would be a great idea to build a permanent track. That's where we're standing today, Derby Downs on the southeast side of Akron. There are two ways to get to Akron. There are the local races that are held in communities around the United States and in Canada, Japan, and Germany. And a youngster can win the local race and represent whatever town it is. Akron, Ohio, Cedar Rapids, whatever the city is, they represent and race under that banner. There's also a competition around the country that's called rally racing. And these are races that are held throughout the year where young people compete in these kinds of races and accumulate points. So the rally contestants have accumulated enough points to be at the top of the list in their regions, and they're here. The simplest car is called the stock car. It's smaller, and it's for the younger child as young as 7. The intermediate cars are called super stock. They're a little bit bigger, same principle. They buy the kits from the Soapbox Derby organization. And those children are a little bit older, that's 10 to 18. And then the third division is masters, and those are for the people who have been around a bit. They're more sophisticated. One of the recent additions in the last few years has been the education segment for the Soapbox Derby. And this is a program that is actually a curriculum that schools use in middle school or the lower high school years, and they actually learn the various aspects of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. They come here to Derby Downs in May, and the teams race the cars, and it's a very great way to get an education, a formal education while you're doing it. They actually have workbooks, they have the videos, they have things that teach them how to build the car, and mostly in science classes, physics classes, those kinds of things. And it's a growing part of the program. And some of the young people who have competed through their schools then feed into the regular Soapbox Derby program. So everybody wins. It's a great aspect of the program. People ask us the question, what makes the cars are all alike? What's the difference? One of the key differences is the driver. The driver has to be focused on what's going on. And remember, we're dealing with kids as young as 7, but they need to focus on what they're doing. They need to hold that steering wheel and not let the car drift too much. And if it does drift too much, don't overcorrect. So many of the same aspects that are in other kind of racing programs are found right here at Derby Downs.
Okay, thanks, Justin, for playing that. So there are Derby races by many communities across the United States and even in Japan and Germany and Canada. And it's interesting that this developed right in our backyard. I mean, as he said, it started in Dayton and it quickly went to Akron because the terrain was better to have a nice hill to have the race on. So it went to Akron in 1935. It's been there ever since. And Chevrolet was a big sponsor of it initially. And I think they dropped out of their sponsorship about 1972, shortly after I raced, because I raced in 1968 and 1969. Now, Office Key is sponsoring it this year, but there are opportunities for other companies and other individuals to sponsor. I know that if a company would pay $500, I think it's $500, maybe it's $1,000, you can have your company name put on the side of a car that's already been built. You can take that car to your place of business and promote it and use it as a sponsor of the Soapbox Derby. Then if you want to have a car built for a person that you know of that would like to race, you can pay a little bit more, I think $1,500, have a car built with your company logo on it, and somebody would race that car. The Cincinnati Soapbox Derby does have a pretty good inventory of cars now. People who have built cars and then turned them back into the Cincinnati Soapbox Derby, such that if you have a child that wants to race, they can get a car that's already built through the Cincinnati Soapbox Derby. But part of the benefit is building the car. You know, right now, I have 5 grandkids. They are ages, I gotta get this right now, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And they're the perfect ages for this. So I did buy a car kit. It's not cheap. It's $500 for a kit, and maybe $600 if you want to get the wheels. And you should do that. So let's say $600, and then it comes and the kids can put it together. It's much like Legos, where you have a instruction booklet and then you have steps. I think there's 15 steps. Each step has its own bag of hardware to put it together. And I would say an adult could put it together in 3 hours if you're pretty good with tools. When you're working with kids, you know, you got to keep motivating them to get steps done. So it does take a little bit longer, but it's very gratifying for the kids to put it together. Let's see. I think what else I should talk about here. When the Chevrolet was sponsoring it, there were probably in Cincinnati, there were probably 100 drivers. And when I raced, it was only boys that did it. But shortly after I raced, I think that in 1971, girls were admitted into it. And now it's probably 50-50 boys and girls. And when Chevrolet stopped sponsoring the race in maybe it was 1980 that they stopped, I think a lot of the funding declined for the Soapbox Derby, because I know there was a gap in the local races. The local races stopped for a period of about 20 years, maybe from 1985 to 2005. And then they started again. In fact, one of the gentlemen that's very active in the organization right now, locally here in Cincinnati, he's the one that picked it up in 2005 and brought it back to life. So now there are quite a few less racers. You know, I mentioned that there were 100 when I raced in 1968 and 69. I would say, now I have not been to a race there was no race last year, and it's maybe been a few years since I've been to a race here locally, but I would guess this year there might be 25 racers, but still a good number, but there's potential certainly for a lot more.
Yeah, we have a question from Terry, and I was going to interrupt too and tell anybody have any questions, please jump in. Terry asked, how fast do the cars travel and how long is the track?
That's a great question. The race is in Alt Park, goes down Observatory Avenue, and it's a pretty good hill. I don't know if you're familiar with Alt Park, but when you drive in there, there's when you come in Observatory, there's a pretty good hill. It goes down into a valley and then up a hill, which is important because that's where the cars stop on the uphill side. But the track is probably 300 yards long. And at the bottom, when you go across the finish line, you're going about 30 miles an hour.
Are there ever crashes?
Yeah, there are
I
some
asked
crashes.
it because I've crashed one before.
Yes. I'm gonna show you a picture of the car I built in a little bit, but when you go down the track, there are hay bales on the left and right that you would run into if you would crash. And it's interesting now when you put the kit together, the amount of left and right movement of the front axle is limited by a couple big bolts, and you can't turn it very far. But when I built the car, I used some cable clamps, because it wasn't a kit then. And back in 68 and 69, you had a book of instructions, but you didn't have a kit. So I used some cable clamps to limit the movement of that front axle, so you couldn't turn it too far left or right. So when Justin and his sister were younger, we got my old Soapbox car out of the attic and took it down a hill. Well, I didn't pay attention to fastening those clamps back on there. And Justin's sister went down the hill and she turned the wheel, and all of a sudden it went full tilt. That front axle went totally to the left, where the left wheel went back against the side of the car, and the front wheel went out towards almost straight ahead of the car, and the car flipped over, and Kristen thought she broke her arm, which Justin quickly ran down the hill and said, "Kristen, don't trust Dad. If you need to go to the hospital, go to the hospital." Because in past years, Justin had broken his arm, and I made him go to baseball practice, telling me he was a wimp for being concerned about his arm. So Justin,
there are no hay bales on that hill either. It was the tallest hill in our neighborhood. No hay bales. A questionable engineering upgrade, I guess. Yeah. We're lucky she wasn't decapitated. This would be a totally different spin on the topic.
Any other questions?
Well, so say you had some kids that might potentially be interested in something like this. How would you get them set up? And it seems like it's coming up quick, so it'd be pretty tough to get somebody involved probably this late in the game. Is that true?
No, it's still possible. I would go to the Cincinnati Soapbox Derby website.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you just Google Cincinnati Soapbox Derby, you'll find it pretty easily.
Let's put it in the chat, Jamie.
There is the race is on June 6th, and there is still opportunity to get in the race. There are cars that are already built.
Mm-hmm.
And if you would contact them soon, they could align you with one of those cars. Next week, a week from Sunday, a week from Mother's Day, there is a Learn to Race event. That's what I would call it, a Learn to Race event, where you could get one of those cars, and I think it's in Gulf Manor. You could get some practice at racing through that event and prepare the child for the race on June 6th at Alt Park.
Nice.
That'd be a great idea for your Boy Scout troop, Jamie.
Yeah, I don't know. There might be some kids that'd be interested in something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of Boy Scouts, it is aligned with the Pinewood Derby. Do the Boy Scouts still do the Pinewood Derby?
Yeah, the Cub Scouts definitely still do the old Pinewood.
Cub Scouts.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's the same. It's gravity racing, just like that. Except it's a little larger car.
So I have a question about that, because I would assume that the cars are all the same, right? So the guy in that video said it's about the driver. Well, you could have a 10-year-old kid that weighs 25 pounds heavier than the other kid. I would assume that he's going to have a pretty significant advantage. Is that true?
That is true. Now, what's done is that there is a weight limit. The weight limit for one size car is 240 pounds, and I think for another size car is 250 pounds, or maybe it's 200 and 250. There's two different weight levels. But what they do is you have your child sit in the car, and then they add weights to it. There's a place in the kit where you have a bolt sticking up through the floorboard with a wing nut on top of it. And when you sit on the scale, they would add weights to it, bring it up to the weight limit. So there is everybody's about the same weight when they race.
And Terry had another question, Dad. When did you place when you raced?
What did I place?
Yeah.
I think out of 100 cars, I was about 85. No, let me put it the other way. I was about 15. I mean, I didn't win the local race, but I won quite a few heats, so that I was a decent contender. And I'll spend a little time talking about the design of the car that I built to try to make it a winning car. I did have a close friend that won the race in Cincinnati, and his car was pretty amazing. And then his brother won a few years later after that. So I had some experience of winning it.
And then Mark had a question. What kind of future occupation would a soapbox derby help introduce a child to?
Well, certainly just the confidence that you gain from building the car, achievement of building it, and then the social aspect of racing with other peers and learning how to lose. I mean, that's a big thing, you get that in all kinds of sports, would develop you for some type of management position, but particularly for engineering, I think it's really good if you're going to follow a path for going to engineering school. It would be helpful for that.
And then his follow-up question was, could a child with help, of course, build a car from scratch? I assume they provide kits, but I suppose you could.
Yeah, you could. No, I don't know that you could qualify to race in Akron if you built it yourself, but you could certainly build one yourself. Yeah, it'd be a great thing. Now, let me show you this. This was this book here is what I used to build the car back in 1968. I still have it. And it has lots of rules about wheelbase, what's the minimum wheelbase you can have, the braking system, the steering system, how it had to be. So they really incorporated a lot of those specifications into the kit when they started doing the kit. So if you're going to build one yourself, you might take the kit as a guide to, in fact, you get the instructions for the kit and use that as a guide to build one yourself.
Yeah, and Mark's comment was that's kind of why I asked. It sounds like they do so much to equalize the competition. It all of them seems arbitrary as to who wins. That's
Yeah,
kind of thing I was thinking too about the weight. You think the one differentiator would be the driver. I guess maybe that's the point, because like the guy in the video said, the steering, the slightest move slows you down, probably slightest weight difference. I don't know.
Well, I talked to some guys this last weekend that I've just gotten involved in the local leadership for the Soapbox Derby and had a chance to be at an event that Justin referred to where his son practiced driving a car this last Saturday. And I asked that question. I said, what, with all the cars being built by a kit now, they're all the same. What makes one win over another? And it was interesting what they said. They said a lot of it is wheel alignment. And my first thought was, well, that's alignment of the back axle wheels with the front axle wheels so that they're all going straight. And he explained that it's more than that. If you have the weight of the car on the axle and the wheels bow out or they bow in, I guess normally they would bow out because of the weight on the axle, then the wheels are not sitting square on the bearings, and that slows the car down. So one of the strategies has been to take that axle and try to put some bow in it to start with, so that when the weight of the car sits on that axle, it makes those wheels perfectly vertical. And that was interesting, I thought.
Well, I'll tell you, with the go back to the old Cub Scout thing, they had the Pinewood Derby where you're just rolling cars down a little hill, little model cars. And I don't know, there are people with a whole strategy for just setting up that kind of stuff. And like you said, axles and wheels and all this kind of stuff. It's I'm sure there's a whole cult around it. And if you're really into it, there's all kinds of little tweaks people do to make those cars go faster. Right. Because everything's the same weight. So it's not a weight advantage, it's other things.
Right.
Mm-hmm. On that topic, let me show you this that I found in my car, because one of the questions might be how have I kept the car all these years? Well, it was in an attic at different houses where I lived, and in storage places because I live in a condo now. So recently I retrieved it, and now it sits in my office at Office Key downtown. But I found this sign in it recently. I don't know if you can read that, but it brings back great memories for me.
Kind of hard to read. Why don't you read it too?
Hard to see it. Okay, let me read it. Dave, your wheels have all spun quite a bit. Suggest you wait until tomorrow before doing any more. I think it's possible to speed them too fast using the drill. And this was a note from my dad, who has since passed. It's a great memory for me to think about this note that he wrote. And it's written on a piece of cardboard. And I remember this cardboard as being a cardboard that normally come in the shirts that he had dry cleaned. He wrote this note to me because when I was building the car, I took a drill and I put a round, like if you would put a sanding tool on the end of the drill, you have a round piece with sandpaper on it. Well, I used that round piece against the wheel to spin that wheel constantly. I had some type of fixture where I had it set up, and I would just run those wheels like for hours, just thinking that I would wear in the bearings so much that the wheels would just fly down the hill. And so he wrote this note to advise me that maybe I was spinning those wheels too much.
I was wondering if that was literal or figurative.
Yeah, no, that's true.
See, we had another question from Elizabeth. Do most people build the car as an education tool, or buy one for the race?
You know, I think it's half and half. I think a lot of kids, it's the racing component that really drives them, and I've seen that in some of the leaders too. There's a group that are really into it because of the racing, and that's what they're into, and they go to stock car races. And then there's others that are in it because of the building of the car, and that's what they favor. So I think more and more the trend is use one of the cars that the Soapbox Derby already has and enjoy the race down the hill. But I think there's still a few there that like the challenge of learning the technology by building a car.
So you mentioned it would take an adult about 3 hours to put it together. How long would it take a kid to put together?
Well, my experience so far, it takes probably 15 hours. It's like an hour here, an hour there, an hour here, an hour there, and work a little bit, and then pound on the table with the hammer a little bit, and look at the jigsaw and play with the pliers, and you know, it takes a little coaxing to keep them moving along.
So it depends on the attention span of the kid,
Yes.
perhaps.
Right.
Anybody else have any other questions? Or do you want to show your the slides, Dad? The one
Yeah,
that you got?
show the slides. I'll show you a car being built. I'll show you the car that I built. Can you share those, Justin?
Yep.
Okay, this is the car that I built. My sister did the graphics on the back, called it Silver Spike, and she put my initials on the side, DM, and I hit a number of 110, so you can see 110 on there. And it was built according to the specs in that book. And this was actually the second car that I built. I built one prior to this. And I'd like to, maybe after we take this picture off, I'll tell you some of the technology that went into this car. Technology that I didn't really fully appreciate until I got to engineering school. So Justin, why don't you go to the next slide? Okay, this is a kit that you buy today, neatly laid out. In the back is a floorboard, and you see there's particular holes in the floorboard. That hole in the middle is where the brake rod for the brake would go through that hole, and you can follow the instructions. You see the instructions, they're there on the table in the front of the picture. That's the instruction booklet, it has 15 steps in it. You might recognize the steering wheel there next to the instruction booklet. And there's some decals you can put on the car. In the very front, there's the axles. And you see that they're square bars with rounded ends where the wheels go. In the center, there's plastic bags. Each bag has hardware that matches the 15 different steps. And then in the center of the picture, that's the body. And it's a plastic body. So you can assemble the car on that floorboard and then put on that body as the last step. And then that body, you can take it off and put it back on via a few screws, such that you can continue to refine the mechanism of the car. Then this picture here, this is the car at a room in the condo building where I live. I went to the condo association and said, can you provide me with a spot to put a car together? And they did. So this is the car under construction. You can see a wrench and some crescent wrench and some Allen wrenches there. You can see the cable for the steering system. Those little round circles on the cable, those are actually turnbuckles. So that column where the steering wheel is, the driver has to reach pretty far under that plastic body to reach that steering wheel and turn it ever so slightly. And you can see the front axle is limited in how far it can turn left and right. There's bolts on the floorboard that limit how far it can go left and right. And then on the floorboard, you'll see some instructions that our grandkids are using to build the car. And Bonnie, I saw that you asked, are they strapped into the car? No, they're not. They're not strapped into the car. But they do wear a helmet. Okay,
That's a
Justin.
good question.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't know if strapping in would help or hurt. And
Yeah. I don't know.
my sister's experience of crashing, it could have made it worse had we been strapped in. You know.
Well, let me.
What is the entry fee?
Oh, the entry fee. You know, I think Office Key sponsorship has covered the entry fee. So there is no entry fee for the race this year. And I'm trying to think what if there was not a major sponsor, what the entry fee would be. It might be $20, something like that. It's not a lot. The expense is really in a car kit. While we're since I was able to show my car there, which I'm pretty proud of, let me talk to you about some of the design features that went into that car. In that car, there was an aluminum plate built into the very nose because it was a pointed car, and if the plywood would just go to that nose, pretty soon the plywood would deteriorate and it would not hold up. So there was actually a piece of aluminum in that nose. And when I built the car, I was very fortunate that my dad, he was actually CEO of a company in Cincinnati called OPW. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, but he had access to get parts for me from the shop that OPW had. I bought many parts from the hardware store, and it was a limit of $30 you could spend on the car. You had to keep all your receipts and stuff, but he was able to get some parts from the hardware store. So the car that I built and designed, the wheelbase was moved to the back of the car, so that when the car was on the starting ramp, the wheels would remain on the starting ramp as long as possible. I always supposed that my competitor, his front wheels would be on the asphalt, while my wheels were still on that ramp, rolling down the ramp, and I would shoot off the ramp well ahead of him, which did happen. It did work, but not as well as I hoped. The driver's seat was moved to the back, again, to keep the weight up on that starting ramp as long as possible. The brake was very unique in that car. It was a cast iron tube and a cast iron sleeve, again, to add weight. Now, the weight limit when I built the car in 1968 was 250 pounds, and it wasn't a time like today when you could just add weights to get there. You had to build weight into the car. So the braking system was a cast iron tube inside of another cast iron tube sleeve, and then it was not held up with a spring, but it was held up with sash weights like you would have in a window. Not sure what you call that, but counterbalance with weights rather than spring, again, to add weight. On the axles, I bolted on steel rods or steel bars. You saw those axles, they were square. I got some square steel bar stock that was just like those squares, and I bolted on the axles to add weight there. And I put a suspension in the car. The cars today don't have any suspension. So on the floorboard, I put some 2x4s and I cut out the center of them so that the bolt that came out from the axle didn't just fasten to the floorboard, but it went through a spring first to create some suspension on the car. So that when it went down over the bump of the ramp, or if it hit a sewer lid, it would go smoothly and not bump and slow the car down. And then the underbody of the car was smooth. And I did that by putting on 3 layers of plywood so that the floorboard bolts would extend through the top layer, and they would be encompassed in the second layer, and then the bottom layer of the floorboard was completely smooth to make it aerodynamic. So there were a lot of engineering features that went into the design of the car. And to start building the car, I used graph paper and drew it out on graph paper. And I sat down next to a wall, used a tape measure to measure what my distance was from my feet to the back of my to my back, to know how big to make the car to fit in.
When you did that, when you made that car, was it, because you said now you have a kit, so everything's pretty much the same.
Mm-hmm.
Did everybody have the same kit back then too?
No, it was just in the rule book. So the rule book would say you need this distance between the wheels. You need to buy the axles from Soapbox Derby. You had to buy the axles and the wheels from Soapbox Derby, but
so the frames of the car, the actual body of the car, is all different.
You could build however you wanted, and there were a lot of different variations. There were some, and still today, there's a kit you can buy to do this. There were some kids that would build cars where you lay back in them instead of leaning forward and towards the steering wheel. You actually lay back as far as you could, and you tilt your head forward. So your whole back was laying on the floorboard, and you just tilted your head forward. So some people would build cars like that, and there's a kit you can buy to do that today.
Seems even more dangerous.
Yeah. Now my neighbor that won, it was kind of interesting what he did. I think his dad helped out with the car a lot, but I think they started off with a fiberglass shell, and somehow they hung from a rope, and they built this shell that was pointed on either end. So the whole car was very aerodynamic. It was pointing to front, pointing to back, and just expanded enough to fit a driver in to it. So they started off building the shell, and then they built the car inside the shell. It was pretty phenomenal what they did.
We are about out of time. Does anybody have any other questions before we finish up, or any? I would guess that if everyone, I'd be curious, did anybody prior to this conversation know anything about the Soapbox Derby? This is probably the most anyone's ever had come in contact with it. I think that, I was thinking about your question about who's had a family member, somebody who participated. Better question might be who has any familiarity at all with the Soapbox Derby, period. I assume it's not high, but hopefully you guys all learn something, maybe check it out and see it around. And it's kind of a cool event. So hopefully it'll gain some traction. It seems like it, would you say, Dad, that it had a heyday and kind of fell off, and trying to bring it back? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair assessment. Yes. It really, it really begs for new leadership right now. I mean, the guys have been doing it for the last 15 years, are very dedicated to it, but I think they're anxious for some new leadership. So that would be a hope of mine, is that some young families would get involved and really carry it forward and expand it from here.
Good deal. All right. Well, thanks for coming, everybody. Thanks for spending some time with us and learning about the, it looks like we have some people that did the Pinewood Derby. Suzanne and Mark both had kids. Jamie, I think you're probably familiar with it too.
Yep.
But yeah, similar concept, different scale, I guess. So, but anyway, thanks for coming. Hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Hopefully the weather continues to be nice out there, and we'll see you guys around soon. And I think we aren't sure what we're doing for next month's Key Connection, but we'll let you know, and we'll hope to see you there. All right.
Great. See you around.
All right, see you guys. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.